Welcome to the Loadout Music Podcast, featuring intimate conversations with emerging and established musicians, recorded at the Gaslight Studios in St. Louis. And now your host, Aaron Perlett. Welcome back to the Loadout Music Podcast. I am your host, Aaron Perlett. As always, we've had the honor of hosting a number of Rock and Roll Hall of Famers and Grammy winners on the show, but any songwriter has a North Star, and my guest today is just that for me. It's a real privilege to welcome in the great Wylie Hubbard to the show. Ray, thank you so much for being on today.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm looking forward to it. What a nice introduction. I can hardly wait to hear me.
I know that you kind of split time growing up between Oklahoma and Texas, and then you ultimately kind of went to college at what was then North Texas State and started spending summers in New Mexico.
Yeah.
And playing out music. But where did your musical kind of journey start? Were you a kid growing up playing guitar? How did that begin for you?
Well, my family really wasn't very musical or anything. My dad was an English teacher, so literature was very important, as a young age. In fact, instead of reading The Three Little Pigs, he'd read The Raven to me, and he got me into literature. So that was, but it wasn't very musical. But then in high school in Dallas, I went to W.H. Adamson High School, and Michael Murphy, he's now Michael Martin Murphy. He was a senior and I was a junior, and they had this talent show, and he came out with a guitar, and he went, "This is a song I wrote," and all of a sudden I went, "It's a songwriter. That's the name that's in the parentheses underneath these songs on these, 45s and 33 and a third LP. That's a songwriter." So I met another fellow in high school, and we started a little folk group, and got a guitar, and we kind of started off in, you start off with Peter, Paul, and Mary and the Kingston Trio, and then you find Dylan, then you find Woody Guthrie, then you find Cisco Houston, and then it just exploded in the whole folk scene. So I had that foundation in folk music and from my father, where the lyrics were important. And so then after high school, went up to New Mexico to Red River, and then there was there was, Jerry Jeff and Michael Murphy and B.W. Stevenson and Rusty Weir and Guy Clark and Townes Van Zandt and, of course, Willie and all this. So all that was kind of happening, and it just kind of, went from there, just that was kind of the foundation. But I also feel very important too. I feel very fortunate to have seen Lightning Hopkins and Mance Lipscomb and Freddie King and Bugs Henderson, all these kind of blues cats there in Dallas and Austin. So that was kind of the foundation as folk music. And then later on, when I was 41, I got clean and sober and started trying to play a guitar and getting into the kind of the groove, the John Lee Hooker Lightning and Mance groove. And so right now, it's been a pretty good marriage. It seems to work for me.
Yeah, I mean, your style is really this hybrid of blues, country, rock, and folk, and you can feel all those pieces in there to a degree. And it's also kind of evident of really, if you look at the Texas music scene, that's really evident within a lot of great Texas musicians that have come out of the state.
Well, like I say, I grew up seeing Guy and Townes and Lightning and Mance and and then I actually got to open a couple of shows for Ernest Tubb, and so all that, those guys were so fantastic, and so that just kind of, I guess, seeped in. So but now, as I feel I feel very fortunate, that I've mentioned this before. I sleep with the president of my publishing company, which is my wife, Judy. So she says, "You write what you want to write, and you make the records you want to make." And she said, "I'll try to sell the damn things." So for me as a writer, that gives me this incredible freedom where I'm not locked in a box. I can write, "Oh, damn, there's a snake farm," or I can, I met Charlie Musselwhite, I'm going to write a song about him, or Jesse May Hemphill, who I just, adore. Then I can say, "Oh, I'm going to write I'm going to drink till I see double. You know what I mean? So I have this freedom to write about whatever I want to write about. And so for me as a writer, because I've never been a mainstream writer to try to, you know, uh, it's very obviously to try to write a hit, you know. So yeah, but all those influences, you know, just like I say, I'm very fortunate to have seen some of these incredible musicians.
Yeah. You know, you mentioned Snake Farm. Do you find it entertaining that when you walk in a room, you've got people yelling as you walk by, like, Snake Farm? That's all they say. I mean,
Well, yeah, a lot of times I've walked into a place and they didn't have anything to yell. So, you know, well, it's a thing now. It's like, just real briefly, you know, I wrote this kind of a joke song called Up Against the Wall, Redneck Mother, which Jerry Jeff recorded it on this album called Viva Talingo, which is still an incredible album to this day. So anyhow, that was kind of the only thing I was known for, because he actually put this song by Wylie Hubbard on the album. So I'd go these old honky tonks and stuff and walk on stage. I go, play Redneck Mother. And I'd play Redneck Mother. And I go, here's another song I wrote. And they'd go, play Redneck Mother again. So for a while, but now it fits in the arsenal. You know, I still pull it out every now and then and have fun with it. But you know, Snake Farm, it's like I say, it's that thing as a songwriter, you know, it's inspiration plus craft. You know, the inspiration going, aha, that'd be a good idea for a song. You know, you drive along, you go, Snake Farm. And then, you know, it's one of my favorite quotes from Flannery O'Connor, said, never second guess inspiration. You know, when you get that great aha, don't doubt it. Just don't, I don't want, you know, just take it and run with it. So, you know, it's like I say, I feel very fortunate to be able to write about, you know, guitars and amps and snake farms and whatever. You know, that's just a good place for me to be, you know.
Yeah, and you know, you mentioned I know you and Jerry Jeff were very close, and you know, he took that song and made it, you know, probably the biggest hit that he ever had as well. And that seems to be when record companies started noticing you as a songwriter as well, and then ultimately, I believe you started off with a deal with Atlantic, and then something stalled, and you went to Warner Brothers, and that was your first record. It was Wylie Hubbard and the Cowboy Twinkies. It was 75 or so. And
yeah, what we lacked in talent, we made up for in attitude, you know. And we'd made a great record in Austin. We at the Pecan Street on like an 8-track studio, and we were getting all these record deals. Even got one from Frank Zappa's Discreet, and everybody loved the record, but they said you need to re-record it because of, you know, state-of-the-art equipment and all that stuff. Yeah. So we and everybody was getting record deals, you know, and so we went to Warner's and we made the record with the band, and then we left and they put rope letters on the cover and put in just the mix and the stuff they did. So it was heartbreaking in a way.
Yeah, that was upsetting for you, right? Because it was I think it was, the producer was Michael Brovsky, and he basically did a lot of overdubbing on it and puts a lot of things you didn't want on that record, and the final product was not something that you were particularly pleased with.
Well, what had happened was we had made a folk rock record in Austin. It was very, you know, you know, I'm not comparing, saying we were as good as, but it lent itself to very, you know, Michael Murphy and B.W. Stevenson and, you know, kind of Buffalo Springfield, a very folk rock record. And that's the record we thought we'd make, but then they put all this other stuff on it because the record label said, well, country radio is not going to play this. So they, you know, put a lot of steel guitars, and I like steel guitars, but on certain tracks it didn't work. So yeah, it was heartbreaking. And in fact, you know, I called my lawyer that I had, who was actually a friend, and I said, "What can I do? This record, it just, you know, it's heartbreaking." And he said, "Well, there's nothing you can do, so I suggest you start drinking." So I did, but you know, it was. That's why I say, like right now, I get to make the records I want to make, you know, and I've been very fortunate to go in the studio with Lloyd Maines and Garth Morlix and George Reef. Those three guys have I've learned so much for them, as far as production. So, I get to make these kind of low down, greasy, kind of cool records.
When for me, I think obviously you've written so much and recorded so much material over the years. The song that I have always felt is kind of most representative of your attitude combined with the playing style, and it also seems to have a fair amount of angst towards Nashville record executives, it is Conversation with the Devil, which was on Crusades of the Restless Nights in '99.
Yeah.
Which has probably, it could be my favorite song line ever. You say, what about all the whiskey and cocaine? I said, well, yeah, but that's no reason to throw me in hell, because I didn't use the cocaine to get high. I just like the way it smelled. But but there is a line in there where you're talking about basically there's a certain group of people that have a reservation in hell, and one of them is Nashville record executives.
Well, that's the great thing about, the problem with irony is not everybody gets it, and it's tongue in cheek, and and so like I say, I get to say my little digs, and I get to I did another song too called Lucifer and the Fallen Angels, where I talk kind of put some digs about different things without being just hitting people over the head with it. And and hopefully some of them, there's a sense of humor. I think it is very important. Like I say, I really, it's like with Johnny Cash, it should have such incredible on a pedestal, but then he did these songs, like the Cadillac one piece at a time, and A Boy Named Sue. And so there was this humor, even though he was kind of giving a message in a way. So, those songs, hopefully, like I say, it's like right now I got a record coming out on Big Machine, which is a big label. They wanted to put out the record, and so we leased it to them and everything like that. And somebody said, well, isn't that kind of hypocritical? And I go, no, man, it's ironic. No, but they've been really good to me. And so, it's songwriting, like I say, having that freedom to put little digs in certain songs, is I feel very fortunate to be able to do that I don't have to. Another thing I've learned too, somewhere in there, I think it was Rook or somebody said, writing, not thinking about its future. What happened was, I got clean and sober when I was 41. Stevie Ray was very instrumental in getting me in recovery, and so at 42, I pretty much didn't really have a career. I'd burned a lot of bridges I'd been sleeping under as far as, gigs and stuff. And so, but somewhere in there when I was 42, I kind of made this commitment that I wasn't going to write songs to see what I could get. I was going to write songs to see what I could contribute. And so, I started writing songs, not thinking about the future, not writing a song like, well, I need to get Garth Brooks or Clint Black to record this. I said, I'm just going to write this song here, like called The Messenger, which talks about fear and what's on the other side of it. And so it kind of, by doing that, I kind of, for an old cat, still got a career. Does that make sense in a way?
It certainly does. And it's interesting that you say for an old cat, it's still got a career, because it's a fascinating place in music landscape today, because so much music has crossed over genres. If you think about country music, what you play doesn't fit into a traditional country format. And, that's very popish, and they even blend in rap and things like that. But serious outlaw country radio has really made a place and Willie's Roadhouse for artists like you play, if whatever the outlaw country brand is, somewhere between rock and country. So yeah, it certainly makes sense to me. But what fascinates me is that you seem to hold this very special place for a lot of songwriters, because you mentioned the thing about Jerry Jeff before and how people would be asking you to play because he put you on that record.
Yeah.
It's remarkable how many live recordings I hear of musicians that will be covering your song, and there's a certain homage they pay to you before they sing it. They have to say this song is by Wylie Hubbard.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that? I mean, it's kind of interesting.
Well, I mean, like, okay, like Hayes Carl name dropped me in a song called Going Down the Road Tonight. And then all of a sudden, Eric Church name dropped me in a song called Mr. Misunderstood. And I'm going, and I never met, I met Hayes, but I never met Eric. And all of a sudden he put me in this song and I'm going, what the heck is going on here? And then Blackberry Smoke, name dropped me in a song too. And I'm going, and I'm going, wow, I feel very, very honored, but I don't understand it because, you got Hubbard and Cupboard. That's about it as far as rhyming it. But I feel like I say very honored, but I really do. Like I say, it's a very cool thing for me to be recognized like that.
It seems like you've had a very long career, and it seems like you've had a couple different acts. Like you had an act in the 70s, and then it seems like the 80s were a little bit quiet, and you've always been kind of just an absolute road warrior. But it seemed like the 90s you had a second act, and then it seems like the last 10 years you've had a third act, a pretty remarkable third act, in fact. I mean, it's kind of neat.
Well, like I say, I'm very, very grateful, and I feel very fortunate. I've met some incredible musicians, like at the record before last, Costarring. I mean, it just, all of a sudden I get this text from Ringo Starr, and he said, this is about before he says, be out in LA next Tuesday at 2:00, and I'll play drums on a track. Whoa. So I had the song Bad Trick that I wrote so I went out there and had a Beatle, play drums on this track. And I'm going, and he's such an incredible, nice guy, but somewhere over in your head, you're going, that's a Beatle. But, and then he played drums on this track, and I was saying, who's going to play bass? And I said, I don't know. He said, how about Don Was? And I said, I don't know him. I've met him once. He said, I'll ask him. And he said, who's going to play guitar? And I said, I don't know. He said, how about Joe Walsh, my brother-in-law? And I went, yeah, okay. And then I called up Chris, and I said, hey, man, I got this track with a beetle and an eagle and a was. I need a crow. He said, yeah. So I sent him the track, and he recorded in some, backstage at some rock club in Dusseldorf or something like that. So, I mean, to me, I'm going, and that still is a mystery how all that happened, and it's pretty impressive if you really think about it. This old guy nobody's really ever heard of, except for kind of underground circles to have that happen. And then because of that, then I started calling up other people and say, hey man, you want to be on this record? And everybody said, yeah, and I got, Ronnie Dunn, Pam Tillis, and a bunch of these young cats, Larkin Poe and Tyler Bryant and Aaron Lee. And so I made that record, and just, whoa. And, and I put it out in a pandemic. But it's like I say, I like making records. I don't really know. I'm not that well versed in selling them.
Yeah.
But Judy worked out the lease deal. So yeah, I guess I'm pretty impressed with me.
Well,
But you know what I mean? I mean, that's something I'm just, it's hard. It's almost unbelievable in a way that happened. And I get these incredible musicians that say, yeah, man, I'll be a part of it. I'll play guitar on it. I'll sing on it. I'm going, whoa, okay. So that kind of validates the anguish of working on a song, I guess. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Songwriting is kind of an anguish and a joy. You anguish over to get it right. I mean, even if it's a goofy song like Snake Farm, it's still well written. You know what I mean? That I feel good about that it's a valid thing. So yeah, so it's you know, it's pretty
Well,
cool.
and with songwriting, you've got the composition, you've got the lyrics, and then within each, you're trying to accomplish different things. Sometimes you're trying to accomplish one thing with them both, and so you can have kind of a song that might be somewhat humorous and
Yeah.
but has a remarkable composition behind it, and sometimes that'll get lost because people will be so caught up in the lyrics themselves that they won't recognize just, wow, did you hear that lead? Did you hear the bass line on that bridge? I mean, they won't catch that because they're caught up in snake, but it's a reality that happens.
Yeah, well, it's like I say, I make records that I want to hear. Like I say, is it's like, the whole, here's the trick that I think that I learned from Lloyd and Gurf and George. The way you make a roots rock record, the way that you make it, but then when it comes time to mix it, you take out the lip smacks, if you got those, but you leave in the coughs and string noises, pedal squeaks, and 60 cycle hums. You leave that in and voila, roots record. You know what I mean? But some of my favorite records were like the first Beatle record, the first Stones record, the first Buffalo Springfield record. You can hear those guys really playing. They tuned to a piano. I mean, but you can actually hear those guys playing. And man, and that's what the record, when I make these records, I have these, great, to get that sound, just a real guy really playing that snare drum.
Yeah.
You get a pedal squeak, so what? The guy played that lick. And so, like I say, I make the records that I really enjoy listening to, and that's kind of what I say too, is you may not like the singer or the lyrics, but you'll like the way it sounds, because I do take pride in making it sound just low down, cool and righteous.
Yeah.
Does that make sense in a way? Yeah.
Well, and I think it's authentic to you. There's an expectation for who you are and the kind of music you produce. And I mean, and then I think, it's a good kind of segue into these last two albums. You mentioned Costarring, and you've got Costarring II, that's TOO coming out. But these have been, even though you're sharing song credits with a great list of artists. You mentioned a couple of them: Ringo Starr, Paula Nelson, Elizabeth Cook, Ronnie Dunn, Pam Tillis. On the last one, it has a very authentic Ray Wylie Hubbard sound to them. Both the first one, Co-Starring, and then what you've released thus far. And thus far, it's only the one song you've done with Steve Earle. Co-Starring II. You've got the rest of the record is going to be released here on March 18th, very soon. But is this, and of course, Willie Nelson and Ringo's coming back on this, and you've got Ann Wilson from Heart. I mean, this is a really impressive group between the both albums.
Yeah.
Was there an inspiration for you behind this, or was this somebody suggesting this to you? What brought this about for you, this pivot for these two records?
I really don't take suggestions very well.
Yeah.
No, it's what happened is, I had the co-starring. I still had a whole bunch of some songs from co-starring one, I guess, left over. So I kind of started coming up with these songs and just kind of continued on. And like, of course, during the pandemic, a lot of these musicians, they couldn't tour, and a lot of them have studios at home. So I just call them up and say, hey, I call Winona and say, man, I got this song. Would you sing on it? She goes, sure. And I said, well, don't you want to hear it? She goes, no, I trust you. And I went, oh, okay. So I just sent it to her and she sang on it and went, whoa. And kind of the same thing with Steve. I said, I'll send you this song. And he said, okay. And and so it just, I mean, I got a track on there with Lizzie Hale and John Five, and it's way beyond my pay grade as a producer, but Julian Raymond, who had done the last Glenn Campbell thing and done Cheap Trick, he said, let me get some guys to play this. And so he took it and just went to the stratosphere. And so it wasn't really anything I'd planned. It just kind of continued on, I mean, it just kind of fell into it, and just, and then I'd written a song and then the song is girl, she wants to go to Antone's and hear Charlie Sexton play, so I wrote it with Charlie Sexton, and Garth Morlick set in. So I said, Charlie, will you play guitar on this? He goes, I name dropped you in the song. He goes, oh, okay, I have to now. And same thing with Garth, who I've known forever. And so he played bass on it. So it just kind of, the snowball kept going downhill as far as Costarring II.
I thought it was pretty fascinating that one of the songs with the one you've released already is with Steve Earle. You guys have had similar careers and been put in kind of similar places. I guess one of the differentiations has been he spent a lot of time in Nashville in the 70s, but you've always been kind of outsiders to a degree. Steve had a commercial hit or two, but in that space between country rock and blues and very unique sounds, obviously, vocally very different, stylistically still some differences, but you've had similar kind of careers, the two of you.
Well, it kind of comes back down to that whole, outlaw thing. Is like, to me, it's like Steve does what he wants to do musically, and he can, of course, in a brilliant writer, but then all of a sudden he, turns around, he does an album with Del McCoury Band, and you go, what? But it works. It's just, and I think it's that the outlaw thing is, or whatever, it just means, hey, I'm going to make the records that I really enjoy making and want to make. And, to have Steve on that, he just, he was, I don't know, man, he writes.
He's remarkable.
True poet lives, and so to have him on there, and he just said, yeah, and sent it to him, and he sang on it and sent it back. So, I mean, wow. What a treat that was.
He was remarkable. I was thrilled to see you guys did something together. Another guy who I'd kind of lump in there who really has not gotten his due, had a hit or two in like the 80s was maybe Delbert McClinton, who's just one of the most talented people walking the planet.
Yeah, man.
So, you know what? I promise you, I know you got time to keep. I'm going to ask you one question to get you out of here, though.
Okay.
All right. So, and I think it's probably more commentary, less of a question, but I was listening to a live recording when you were playing Redneck Mother, and you're talking about songwriters that ask you questions about good songs, and it was very funny because I've talked to John Oates from Hall & Oates about this too, about how he tolerates playing the same song for 40 years, but you basically said, it's a good song when you can tolerate playing it for 25 years.
Well, I think it's like, kids come up and say, what's the most important thing about songwriting? The most important thing about songwriting is right after you write a song, ask yourself, can I sing this for 38 years? With Redneck Mother, I didn't do that, but with Snake Farm, I went, yeah, I can sing this. But it's one of the real, I don't know, one thing about songwriting too, that when I got serious into my 40s and learned to finger pick and trying to get that dead thumb groove, and is that, I know this may sound weird, but I write a song and I'll look at it and then I'll sing it and I'll stop and I'll sing it again. And then I go, thanks. I'm very grateful for that song. And I don't really know who I'm thinking or what I'm thinking, but I just want whatever it is to know that I am grateful for that song. And so, yeah, whether it's the muse or whatever, but I just, thanks, because it's done and it works for me.
Ray, I appreciate we appreciate you. Appreciate you, Ray. Thank you so much, Ray Wylie Hubbard, for being on the Lowdown Music podcast. It is honestly, it's a true privilege for me personally. It's an honor for the show, and hopefully, maybe I can convince Judy to let you come back one more time.
You bet, Aaron. I'd love to. I just kind of was schedule. I got this other thing I got to do today, but we'll set up another again and do another. We'll talk about me for another 30 minutes. No, we don't have to do that. We can talk about anything. But thank you, Aaron. I had a great time. It really was. It was fun. Thank you.
Hey, folks, if you made it this far, and judging by our numbers, you haven't, thanks for listening to the Lowdown Music Podcast. You can always find us at lowdownmusic.com and wherever you like to get your podcasts, like iTunes or SoundCloud. And of course, as always, thanks to Gaslight Studios for hosting us. Have a good one.